Okay, I'm gonna rant about ChatGPT. Again, it's displaying no ability to think and it has no idea what it's doing. Again, I tried this system multiple times. Outside of cute things, I'm talking about like stuff that is a child or a puppy can do. Outside of that, it's basically a calculator that averages out shit and gives you the answer. And it glosses over details in such a politically correct way, it makes me giggle all the time. I'll give you an example. Here is an example, right? Um, One sec. Well, let me show you basic. I'm studying Angular, so it might be a little bit coding stuff. But I'll show you. Okay, we create a variable which is called. Forget about it. We create a thing which is called um, foo. Okay, we name it foo. Variable equals foo, and we assign it to, let's say, Apple. Okay, so every time we use foo, Apple is going to appear. Okay, so we use foo. You will see that foo is equal to Apple. You probably do it in maths. I don't know if you get to a certain level in high school. If you're doing high level maths, it's very similar to functions, but this is a variable. Okay, so now look, we can say foo is equal to peer. Now we're gonna console log it. So now foo will be peer. Do you see? What happened? We created a variable, we assigned value to it as an apple, and then we redeclared the variable. We basically reassigned. Imagine you have a box, we put a label, we can call this a box. Honestly, it's probably gonna be the easiest way to do it. Okay, so look, we have a box, we put a label on the box saying apples, right? So this would be multiple apples. And then somebody told us, hey, there's actually pears in the box, not apples. So what we did was we removed the label apples and put pears on it. And then that's it. So now when you look at the box and you point at it, it says pears as opposed to apples. Alright? So now bear that in mind. All that happened was that first box was ran in here and then it was ran in here. So this ran second. That's why when you look at the box, you get peers because it reassigned the value. Now we're gonna get into a bit of a that might be a bit heavy, but I'll explain it. Angular, when you create Angular, has a component. Component has two parts in it. You have controller, which is your JavaScript, and then you have your HTML, which is your display. Now here you can create a box. Create a box in here. Normally, that's the way to do it. But you can also create a box in here too, right? So now the question is, what happens if you create box in here and then recreate it in here? What will be, so let's say we put apples in here and then now box is equal to pears in here. So when we try to display box, what is going to happen? Is it going to show apples or is it going to show pear? Now, the first question we have to ask, which one runs first? If it's HTML, then the box is going to be pear. If HTML runs first, so think about it. HTML runs first, and then controller runs second, right? So that means box was first pears, then it became apples. So the final value is apples, right? But if controller runs first, so what happened, right? In the controller, the box value was apples, but then HTML ran and reassigned it to pears. So the final value will be pears. So that's a very, very important distinction between how does the programming works, because sometimes you're thinking, why isn't the value displayed correctly? But that's because could be an HTML that is reassigning the value. So I asked ChatGPT exactly this question: why just in init override scope variable in controller? It just gave me a bunch of basic shit. So it glossed over the detail. It told me what init does, but it didn't tell me why this happens, right? So here's the answer. Look, this can lead to unintended consequences and make your code harder to understand and maintain. That doesn't tell me anything, right? If foo is already defined, right? Now, to avoid such conflicts and maintain, generally recommended to initialize variables in the controller using nginit and this approach keeps a blah 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 blah. But it didn't answer the question. It didn't answer the question. All it told you is don't do it. It's not good because it will lead to unintended consequences and make your code harder to understand and maintain. Whereas in reality, code reads top to bottom. So whatever is at the bottom will be the final value. And since HTML runs after controller, you will have final value coming from HTML rather than the controller. And that's the actual explanation. Because it's exactly the same as in here, you see? Controller, which was your starting... well, you're not an Angular expert, but I'm just saying that, okay, controller created the box and it assigned apples. Then HTML reassigned the box value to peers, and that's why nginit, that's why this happens, basically. Because code runs top to bottom. It's the same with CSS. I'll show you some example. Okay, let's do H1. Let's do classic hello world. So let's do H1 and color will be red. Oh, whoops, I put it as a class, my apologies. Okay, so now let's do H1 again and call color green. So the color is gonna be green on display. Do you see? Because what happens is code runs top to bottom and then the final value is going to be whatever is the last declaration, and it's green. So likewise in here it's the same shit. You create your box, at the end your box is now peers, so that's going to be the final value. Exactly the same shit in here. Controller creates box, it's apples, then after controller HTML runs and it reassigns it to peers, so your final value is peers. That's the explanation, as opposed to saying unintended consequences, because it doesn't know the answer. Okay, take care, bye bye.